We delve into the fallout of Nigeria's newly inked mining agreement with France, a move by the Tinubu-led administration that is stirring controversy, particularly in the mineral-rich northern part of the country. Amid deep-seated trust issues with the government, critics are questioning what this deal truly means for Nigeria's sovereignty and resource control. And to help us dissect these issues and more, we're joined by Iliyasu Gadu, a public affairs and policy analyst who recently wrote an op-ed on the Daily Trust newspaper about this bilateral agreement. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good evening, Adlai. How are you?
Fine, thank you. It's safe to say that a lot of people on the sidelines of that bilateral engagement with France over a week ago, that on the sidelines it's been cheers from the private sector, for instance, who were also part of that event. But sum up your opinion piece about why you think this is bad news for Nigeria.
Well, have you ever, let me just put it metaphorically. When you are engaging with a country like France, with all its record in Africa and elsewhere, and especially with regards to some of the countries that it had, colonized and are currently have had their own, feel of that relationship, and that they're trying to cut ties with France. If you inviting France into some of your most sensitive parts of your business and your resource, and all that, it's a bit like, inviting the wolf into the chicken coop. Because at the end of the day, you will most likely regret it, like the countries around you who are regretting their relationship with France, and they are saying, this far, enough is enough. So if you have to engage with France in this regard, then you have to look at the history of France and Nigeria and Africa should be a guide. And that's where you should be able to say, how do I engage with France? Seeing that the history of relationship between Nigeria and France, even before the colonial, before the colonial regime set up, even during the colonial regime, so to speak, was not itself kosher. Let me even give you, one nugget of information. The amalgamation of the northern and southern protectorates was done by the British to be able to counter the French. If you observe closely, we have countries surrounding us are French countries, are French-speaking countries,
yeah.
Francophone-speaking countries, and these countries were, at the time that Britain and France were in competition to get to this area, the French had already gotten to this area before the British, and the British were sort of apprehensive that the French in some of these countries surrounding us would move in. So they now amalgamated the two. One of the reasons why they amalgamated the northern and southern protectorates into one country. Just like the Portuguese did in Brazil. Because in Southern America, it was a competition between Spain and the Portuguese. And the Portuguese decided to collapse all their colonies to turn it into Brazil so that they can better handle Brazil as a country.
Yeah, but a counter argument is, while the historical context is important to understand the evolution of this relationship, including the role France played or did not play in the Nigerian Civil War, is that a fact remains that Nigeria does not have a colonial history with France. Nigeria does not have, any sort of similarity with countries like Niger, Mali, Chad that you drew comparison in your analysis of the situation. And this strictly remains a bilateral engagement, a bilateral deal that Nigeria is getting to as a sovereign country, not as a remnant colonial territory that France once controlled. So it's sort of like comparing apples and oranges. We don't share the same history with the likes of Chad, Mali, Niger, and all the other former colonies of France who are now trying to walk away from their relationship with their past colonial master.
No, but a leopard cannot change its spots. The French, In fact, it is even in our own interest to even look at it closely, because the Hausa have a saying that that means if you know that there is trouble within your in the next door, and you know the perpetrator of that trouble, you have to be very careful how you deal with them. So in this case, yes, it's a matter of sovereignty, but let's look at the international situation, where you have a relationship between a power like France is and a lesser power, or even an ordinary country like Nigeria. There's always the chance that the power, with all its resources and all its abilities and capacities, would swamp the smaller country, in this case Nigeria. And that, in this relationship...
But Nigeria is a bigger, smaller country compared to Niger, Mali, or Chad, or Burkina Faso, or any other Francophone country, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. In comparison with these countries, yes. But in comparison with a country like France, Nigeria is nowhere anywhere. And then the French have the history, they have the resources, they have the technology, they have the capacity to be able to turn things around, to be able to tweak some of this, some of the protocols in the arrangement. And that is where which would be wary. When you have a country like France engaging with Nigeria, there's always the possibility that France will walk away the winner, because they know all they can, they have the connections, international and all that, and we have to be wary, especially seeing that these countries with whom France has had, decades of relationship, are trying to walk away. There's something about that relationship that they're working from, and we should be very wary. We should be able to decide to say, look, thus far, it's either we decide, knowing what France has been to us, knowing the kind of things that France has done to Nigeria in terms of, covert activities against Nigeria.
Is that a fact or a suspicion of yours? Because
it's not
there's nothing official in terms of how...
I did say covert, I didn't say overt. But we all know that the French played a certain role in the civil war. They supplied arms, they even thwarted Nigeria's effort in trying to see what that, the war comes to an end.
But as we do know, Mr. Iliyasu, countries change, administrations change, agendas change, right? No country is the same 60 years ago. No country had the same agenda 70 years ago. I mean, they vary from point to point. Interest is something that is permanent. Every country wants to develop its society, so to say. And for the most part, a lot of people want to just stick to the deal points, which is purely economic. France gets something, Nigeria gets something. It's a win-win situation. Looking at the economic deal points, what issues do you have about what was agreed upon on paper?
Well, it's just an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. It's not the real deal. There will be a lot of gaps to close. So, but we are saying, yes, fine. France is a very important country in Africa. We can leverage on their experience in Africa, on their capacities and a lot of things. Yes. But what kind of relationship should we have with France? Are we going to hug them, or are we going to treat them with a long spoon? That's it. And looking at the history of relationship between Nigeria and France, I would suggest we treat them with a long spoon, because, as I said, they are a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. They're a superpower. Yes, they're a power, not as much as of the same scale as America or Russia, but they are also a very, very significant power in Africa. And the stories about France and its engagement in Africa has not been palatable. We see what happened, for instance, in Niger, where the French had the monopoly on the uranium deposits there, and we saw what came out of that relationship. They were practically scooping uranium almost free of charge. They were giving the Niger people and government pittance.
Again, a lot of people say it's easy to understand that because they are a former colonial power in that country. In the case of Nigeria, they are not. They never colonized this country, so they cannot have the same
influence.
I think
it's a weak argument, because, I mean, wherever France, as a power, as a country with capacity, would have the opportunity to do what it wants to do, it will do it.
Yeah, but
and
you can also argue that, you know, they've had some kind of stronghold in the political arena in most of its former colonies, which allows it to have some of these unfavorable deals that people have always talked about that exploited some of their former colonies. In the case of Nigeria, that is not what is obtainable.
I hope that is the situation. But then you have to be wary. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have any relationship with France, or we just dismiss them. But what we're saying is we have to be wary, because, you know, the history of France should guide us in what we're going to, what relationship we're going to enter with France. Even if, from the look of it, it's going to be beneficial, or as we say, win-win.
So we shouldn't isolate ourselves, but also be very cautious of France's interest in our mineral deposits, in the economic development of this country. But do you think the Tinubu administration is taking that into consideration from its body language? I mean, we saw captains of industry accompany the president and his entourage to the several deals that were being made, to the MOU signing and so on and so forth. That surely looks like a positive development for Nigeria, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, let me just say it. I mean, it's not that we're having a relationship with France for the first time, or we're just coming into a relationship with France. I mean, in those days we still have that company, CFAO, which is a company Français de l'Afrique Occidentale, and we have a company called SCOA, that's Société Commerciale de l'Ouest Africaine. These are trading companies that have been trading in Nigeria before even the we attained independence. They've been there. I mean, at one point, Peugeot was, you know, it was impressive to see Peugeot, you know, in Nigeria. It sold more cars than British-made cars. So in fact, I remember a French diplomat I was having a conversation with. He said when he came to Nigeria, he was surprised. He saw quite a lot of Peugeot, you know, brands. He saw 505, 505. It was very, very popular in Nigeria, and he was wondering.
Still is, to some degree.
Yeah, to some extent. And we had Peugeot plant. Yeah, we have Total. You know, Total Energy. We have so many French companies. We had even French construction companies like Bouygues. We had Dumais, Degremont, and the rest of them. Lots of them, and they had played quite a lot of, you know, positive role in Nigeria. But when it comes to the next stage, which is the mineral one, that is where you have to.
But you do agree with everything that is happening from Zamfara to other underdeveloped mining activities that we have, or exploited mining activities that we have in Niger State, in Zamfara, for instance, with all of the illegal activities, which has also facilitated the insecurity that we've seen in some of those states. You do agree that we need some sort of strategic plan to develop this particular sector of our economy. There's a lot of untapped resources there, and France, as a global player in that area, has the expertise, the resources that we can leverage on. So do you think, overall, considering the upside and the downside, that going into this might be the best thing for especially the northern part of the country, where some of these huge mineral deposits lie?
Yeah, but you see, the issue here is we have to be very, very strategic here. Next door is Niger, with whom we share quite a huge borderline, you know, and about 7 states of Nigeria, you know, border with Niger. And there have been happenings in Niger that have raised a lot of hiatus there. And, you know, and France has been a central figure in that. So bringing in the French here, it's really, really alarming, especially to the states that border on those areas. And don't forget,
when you're saying it's going to make it worse?
No, I'm not saying it's going to make it worse. It depends on how we handle it. We can bring in the French, but under the terms that strictly restricts their involvement specifically to those areas. And we want to know that, because when you have mining operations, it comes with an element of security, because you need to secure the mining pits, mining areas, and you need to have some kind of security so that people don't go in there and interfere with the process of the mining. So you need security. We want to know the kind of security arrangements that is going to accompany that, such that such security arrangements do not destabilize the area or become a staging point for further. You also in your op-ed referenced several attempts in the past, not just by France, even by Britain, to have some sort of military base here in Nigeria, and it has always been pushed back several times. We talk about AFRICOM and the likes, but to douse those tensions, the Chief of Defense Staff also did say, listen, we have some of these international collaborations with the French military, with the British military, and all the other international players who have the expertise, who also have the resources that Nigeria's military needs to develop its own strategic security architecture, and there's nothing to worry about. We don't have to worry about international military bases springing up in different parts of the country. Doesn't that reassure you that that is not what's going to happen as a result of this MOU? To a large extent, I'm reassured, and to a large extent, Nigerians are reassured, because one thing I know for sure is that our security, outfits, the whole lot of them, whether it's the military, the intelligence and all that, are very, very conscious of what France is in Africa and in Nigeria. So it's not a matter of, letting your guard down. They are aware of what France is. They are aware of what France has been in terms of its relationship with Nigeria, in terms of whether, and the issue of military bases in Nigeria is very, very sensitive. In 1963, the British wanted to have a defense pact, and defense pact where they could station bases here. And the reason why they wanted to do that was because they were still not, they were still suspicious of the French, because Nigeria was surrounded, and then because of the newly discovered oil fields in Nigeria in 1959, Oloibiri. And so they were wary, because it's like it takes one to know one. So the British wanted a defense pact with Nigeria.
For their own interest.
For their own interest, But then the Nigerian military and elements of Nigerian elite said, no, look, we are independent. Yes, we want to cooperate with you, we want to collaborate with you, but we want to do it from a point of, where we will not be swamped or, by you. So yes, we can send our people to go and train in Sandhurst, Aldershot, Surrey, Camberley, and the rest of them. But we are not, for the love of us, going to allow you to have bases. And the same thing, Americans have been coming over here too, trying to see how they can set up what they call AFRICOM, Africa Command. But that has not seen the light of day, because Nigeria still again is sensitive.
So why do you worry that there's some hidden agenda? There's going to be a subterfuge in some way, for lack of a better expression, with this MOU. I mean, our history has shown that Nigeria has been resilient and has been stern about not having any sort of international military base in this country. So why worry now?
Yeah, because as I said, we are getting into that deeper relationship now. All along, it's been trading, sort of a trading relationship, which, from a security perspective, it's manageable. But when you begin to have mines, you have, huge tracts of land that will be allocated to the mine that will go into, and then when you have the need to secure those mines, you are going to have an arrangement that will secure. Now, if Nigeria is not going to secure those mines, because you need to go to where mining activities are happening around the world. It's a huge enterprise. It's a huge exercise, and there are security people there. Now, most of these mining companies, rely on contractors. They rely on a number of things.
You mean outsourcing their security?
Yeah, because they need to give it to the experts so that they can secure the mining sites. And those experts, we need to be able to know who are these experts. We have to vet them. That's why I'm saying, yes, we need to have this relationship with the French, but we also need to be able to be on our guard, such that these areas, because you saw what happened in Zaire, in DR Congo, where the mining companies took control of the areas. It happened in Liberia. It happened in Sierra Leone, where the mining companies took over areas where they were doing the mining. And at the end of the day, it was chaos. it was trouble. And Nigeria, in fact, had to go into Liberia to save the situation, and Sierra Leone. We don't want that to happen. And that's why, yes, the Secretary of Defense Staff's comments are reassuring. But then we don't stop at reassuring. We have to be very, very vigilant, because we have our handshake with France has been, from afar. Now that they are coming into the country, we just have to continue to be vigilant, and we have to make sure that it stays, the MOU and the relationship stays within reasonable bounds and manageable bounds by the Nigerian security forces. We cannot take our security light. We cannot take it for granted that that the French are going to be good to us. No, we have to be on the basis of what the French have been, and what they are doing in other parts of the world, and on the basis of the history of the French, not just in Nigeria, but around in Africa and otherwise. We just have to be very careful and very vigilant.
And when you talk about this deal, the MOU, and everything else that it entails, when you put it on a scale, the good versus the bad, or the pros versus the cons, which one do you think outweighs the other?
Well, at this moment, I won't say for sure which one outweighs the other until we see.
So from your projection, I mean, surely you're skeptical about a lot, but is there anything that gives you hope that this could be a potential for growth and development, especially in northern Nigeria, with everything else that is happening with the tax reform bills, the underdevelopment in the north, the poverty in the north, and everything else that is happening with insecurity? Do you think the good outweighs the bad, or is it the other way around?
No, I would have wanted a situation whereby other parties are allowed to come into the mining industry too, mining sector too.
Other parties domestically or internationally?
Internationally. People like Australia, they have a very good, I mean, I'm not canvassing for them, but I'm looking at the capacities, because Australia has one of the.
Is there a chance that France is offering us a better deal than Australia?
Yeah, let's see what the deal is all about. We have not been told what the deal is. That's why in my article I said, let us know the terms. Let us know the commercial terms and the other terms that go with it. We need full disclosure on this. Let it not be, an arrangement, a personal or commercial arrangement. It must be something that is good for Nigeria. It must be something that is secure for Nigeria. It must be something that we can leverage on. There are some countries around the world that can also give us this kind of, thing we're offering France. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to put all of this together and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't mean we don't take ourselves and put ourselves into the mouth of just one of somebody who will swallow us. Yeah. But we need to be able to put all the parties together and say, okay, Australia, this is the concession we're going to give you. South Africa, Russia and all that. Let's put them all together and then get the best deal out of them. But if you give it to the French, there's likely to be a monopoly, and then at the end of the day, we'll cry about it.
The president has been traveling lately, striking some of these deals, talking to various investors in the global marketplace about coming into Nigeria, about investing in Nigeria. How much confidence do you have in the Tinubu administration to negotiate the best deal for this country in terms of some of the investments that we critically need, to be honest, to restart or jumpstart our economy?
Yeah, it's been said. I mean, that's the mantra that we've been hearing since the president came to power. But I doubt if what he's doing now will attract foreign investors, because, when you come to an economy that is shrinking, that the currency is floating. It's not anchored. There's no guarantee that, when you put your money here, you are going to get something out of it. And then there's also the situation that the people are getting poorer and poorer, because their purchasing power parity is very low. You are also looking at a situation whereby there's insecurity. You are looking at a situation whereby there's massive corruption. You're looking at a situation whereby there is a lot of gaps, loopholes. Nobody wants to put his money in uncertain society, and that's what's happening. Tinubu and his minions might say, yeah, we're doing well, but it doesn't translate.
Sounds a little harsh, doesn't it?
So tell me what I would say.
I mean, his administration would be nice.
Okay, his administration. Right. Sorry about that, viewers. But then, it is something we have to see on the faces of Nigerians. When several millions of Nigerians are crying, they're the ones who actually are going to move the economy. It's not some figures from World Bank or whatever. It's the people that are going to drive the economy. And when their purchasing power is very low and getting low every year, you are not likely to have. And then don't forget, some of the most outstanding companies, long-standing companies in Nigeria have left this country because of these issues. So how would you attract new ones when they see that the old ones that have been here, companies like PZ, like a lot of them, Procter and Gamble are leaving, and then some are scaling down their operations? Then you don't need to. You don't need anybody to tell you that you need to be able to.
Well, if a big player, international player like France, is willing to sign an MOU like this, isn't that going to send a big positive message to the rest of the players to say, if France is willing to put its money in Nigeria, maybe it's because it's safe to invest in Nigeria again?
But then that's why I said there has to be some due diligence. What is the situation of France today? Itself is in economic doldrums. The top economy in Europe is not France. In fact, it's not even the third. It's Germany. And then, of course, after that you have Britain. And France itself is struggling because some of the economic, sectors of France are actually flagging. So it's an opportunity, yes. If I were France, I would take advantage. But for Nigerians, what do we see? What can we see from France? And what we see from France is that it's not something we are going to encourage to come. Right. We have to be very, very careful to be able to, when they want to bring them into Nigeria. We have to have some very, very strong strictures about what they're going to do in Nigeria.
Okay, in the final analysis, if you have to put it to Nigerians straight about what to expect based on your analysis and your conclusions about this MOU, this deal between Nigeria and France, as far as bilateral relations are concerned, what are the key takeaways that you have for Nigerians?
I think we should sit down these negotiations with France, and not just with France. Nigeria is actually a country that can attract quite a lot. We need to sit down and discuss this. There are lots of things that we can get. In international relations, you get what you negotiate. You don't just go in there with your left foot. You go with a top negotiating team. You study who you are going to, engage with. You know how you are going to engage with them and know what areas you can actually look out for. But you don't just go because you want to go and get a relationship. You go in there you do your homework. France definitely needs us. We need France too. But we can also talk to other people, who can also give us the same sort of thing. We compare apples and apples, not apples with oranges. France is good, but we have to be very careful with France.
All right. A word of caution, they say, is always good, especially in the grand scheme of things, in terms of managing the commonwealth of a country like Nigeria. Iliyasu Gadu, as always, a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for the analysis, and we hope to circle back on this one and perhaps maybe talk about all the positive developments that might be the outcome of some of these deals and agreements. But for now, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I was glad to be here, and thanks everybody.
Right. Okay.